It is so frustrating how Disney actively avoids using their best stories and instead gives us a bunch of projects that barely anyone is asking for.
I totally get what you're saying. Disney has been busy making shows no one has asked for. I can't understand why, when the potential for good stories based on established characters is so great.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy that Disney isn't taking advantage of all the incredible source material and great stories they have at their disposal. Star Wars is arguably one of the biggest franchises in the world with some of the richest lore you could easily draw from.
It's just so simple.
One of the biggest stories fans have been craving for years is a Vader movie. I know some people will argue that the original 6 movies already cover his entire story, but there's a 20-year gap between the prequels and the originals that's filled with tons of unexplored content. I'm confident fans would love to see a movie that actually focuses on Vader and dives into the period right after Revenge of the Sith. It would be so emotional and compelling to see a film that shows Anakin struggling to adapt to his new life, especially if it included flashbacks from the Clone Wars and brought back Natalie Portman as Padme. You can't tell me that a Vader movie like this wouldn't be a box office hit. Star Wars is a massive franchise with countless interesting stories that could fill the gaps between the main storylines or even go on to explore new timelines like the Old Republic. But Disney keeps choosing not to explore these kinds of stories, opting instead to push out surface level content with no depth. It's just one of many great opportunities they're missing out on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what surprises me the most is that they aren't even trying to produce shows that people actually want to see, especially when the ones they do produce are performing so poorly. For example, the Book of Boba Fett got canceled after just 1 season, and there's no confirmed news or active development for a 2nd season of Obi-Wan Kenobi because it didn't do well. We even just heard that The Acolyte is getting canceled too. It seems like so many of their recent projects have been one-season wonders that were quickly abandoned due to poor performance.
Because those things suck.
Honestly, no one was really excited about the Book of Boba Fett, and there wasn't much interest in watching what was essentially a Princess Leia and Reva show in Obi-Wan Kenobi. It just baffles me that they aren't going for what could be almost guaranteed successes, especially when the shows they've been putting out have been underwhelming. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely get what you're saying. It's almost like Disney actively avoids their good stories and instead chooses some of the worst ideas, trying to fluff them up into something watchable. Take The Acolyte, for example. I actually think it's a great idea to go back to the High Republic era. It's an unexplored timeline with a lot of potential, but clearly based on audience scores and fan reactions, people did not like that show, and for good reasons. It breaks established lore. The acting was pretty bad, and the story just flat out didn't work. It goes against the original storyline, so why do they keep making these kinds of stories when there's so much source material and other ideas they could use? I'll get into why, but it's really frustrating for true fans who want to see all the great stories from George Lucas expanded upon. Disney obviously knows what we want. They could just look at the comments on social media for starters, but they actively ignore us. Then when we don't like their show, they try to blame us, calling us toxic fans. But that's not how it works. They're supposed to try to please the audience, but instead they continuously try to force us to like something we clearly don't.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when you consider how sophisticated and massive Disney is as a business, you'd expect them to be hiring the best of the best, the people who can really steer the ship and create amazing content.
That doesn't make sense to me.
But like you mentioned, it seems like they're deliberately avoiding the obvious choices, the content that would be a surefire hit. It makes you wonder, do they really not know what they're doing? Are they just completely out of touch with what the audience or consumers actually want? I don't think they're clueless. They have access to the same information we do. They can see the feedback on social media, and they know how poorly received some of these shows have been. So it almost feels like there's some other reason behind their decisions, maybe an agenda they're trying to push or certain boxes they're trying to check, but it definitely raises questions. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's absolutely prioritizing agendas over storytelling. In these big corporations, especially within certain franchises, you often have so many high-ups who try to please the loud fans instead of prioritizing the majority of fans. Sometimes it is difficult for the franchise to break away from these agendas because they are so flooded with these people who support it that if someone with common sense wants to suggest doing something different, it's tough to change direction. But on the other hand, it's really ridiculous. Imagine if Coca-Cola made a new soda and all the consumers said it was terrible, but Coca-Cola insisted, no, this is a good drink, you should like it. That's so stupid. And it's exactly what Disney is doing. If your consumers don't like the product you're producing, then you need to change something. The whole point of a business is to satisfy the consumers and customers. If they don't like your product, you shouldn't keep forcing the same thing on them, hoping they'll come around. You should change something and do your best to win them over. That's how you build a business. That's how you build a franchise. But Disney either has no intention of doing this or, like you said, they're just clueless about maximizing profits or managing a business.
Exactly, like you said, the main goal of any business is to please the customer, and Disney clearly isn't doing that right now. That should lead to some kind of change, right? So when are we going to see that shift? When will we get back to what people actually love? When will we get the metaphorical Coca-Cola products, the iconic stories that resonate with everyone? It's strange because that's how almost every other business operates. If consumers don't like something, they stop making it and try something new. They don't just repackage the same thing with a different name or slightly tweak it and hope for better results. Businesses adapt because that's how they survive. Trying the same failed approach over and over again is, as they say, the definition of insanity. So it really boggles my mind. Disney, like any company, wants to make money. They're no stranger to that. But it's interesting to see the direction they've taken so far and whether we'll ever see a course correction.
No, it's really interesting to see the direction Disney is taking with Star Wars and Marvel, their two biggest IPs. It's becoming clear that they're slowly running these franchises into the ground. Sure, some people might argue that they're still producing good content and accuse you of being a toxic fan, but just look at the feedback on social media and the audience scores. It's obvious that the quality is declining over time. The big question is, at what point will Disney actually burn these franchises to the ground, or will they manage to turn things around? Right now, they're just relying on their big names, Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, and people are still going to see their stuff because of that. But like I said, the question is, at what point will their name alone not be enough to sustain these franchises? Eventually, something will have to change, or they will end up destroying these iconic brands. It's sad because they have arguably the two biggest franchises in cinema history, and they're not taking full advantage of them. They keep trying to appeal to the loud minority of fans instead of the longtime fans who actually care about the lore and stories.
No, you're definitely right. At this point, I'm not sure if there's going to be some grand correction that will save the franchise. Disney has made so many poor decisions with their TV shows and content that have drastically altered the canon for the worse. Honestly, the best case scenario might be for Disney to sell the franchise. I think that would be the best outcome for everyone involved because Disney clearly doesn't know how to handle Star Wars anymore. They need to pass it on to someone who does. Someone like George Lucas could take over, but he's getting older, so it's uncertain who might eventually get the rights if, and I think it's more of a when than if, Disney decides to let it go. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about Disney's failure to produce content that really hits home. So yeah, if you guys have been watching till this point, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on the future of the Disney Star Wars franchise.